This is the Lofree Flow, a premium, low-profile mechanical keyboard with some of the smoothest typing around. However, we're going to dive into whether it lives up to its $160 price tag or not. This video is coming out a little bit after the announcement of the Lofree Flow Lite. You can see my unboxing video of both keyboards and an initial comparison. This video is going to be a dedicated standalone review for the Flow, but I'll soon be releasing my full review of the Lite as well. Both videos are going to be linked in the video description once complete. Also, in the interest of disclosure, Lofree did send over the Flow Lite for me to review, but I bought this one, the regular Flow, with my own money in order to give you guys, the viewer, the best review and comparison possible on both models. And my promise to you is that my reviews will always be as honest as possible, no matter where the products come from. So now, let's jump into the review. The Lofree Flow is a beautifully designed keyboard. It's simple in design and appearance, making it ideal for a low-profile option within a simple desk setup. The case is full aluminum, which makes it solid and sturdy, but it's surprisingly not as heavy as you might think. Mine weighs in at 606 grams, or about 1.34 pounds. Now, although the metal case feels premium to the touch, it also feels rather sharp, which I'm not super fond of. The edges on the top and the bottom are less rounded than I'd like to see. I'm not sure that they'd actually be able to cut someone, but it certainly feels like they could if they hit you just right. This particular version is a 75% model, which is known as the Flow 84, as it has 84 keys. There's also a bigger 96% version called the Flow 100, which has 100 keys. Keep that in mind though, as it's going to come back up later. You can get either size with these white keycaps, or you can choose black keycaps, though the aluminum frame remains the same silver color in either configuration. From an ergonomics perspective, there's just a single typing angle with no adjustable feet on the bottom. It sits at just 4 degrees, which is rather low and results in a very flat appearance and feel when using. Typing on the Lofree Flow suffers as a result of this lower typing angle. I'm someone who typically adjusts their keyboard feet up to the highest level available, so this lack of adjustability has been annoying for me, and I'm sure many others as well. In writing this script, I actually wound up propping my keyboard up with a drink coaster that I found on my desk, and that resulting 9-degree angle or so was a lot more comfortable for long-term typing. I've also tried using the keyboard in its default 4-degree angle, which is fine, but it's just not my preference. The switches found on the Flow are made in collaboration with Kale. Though they offer a linear Ghost, Tactile Phantom, and Clicky Wizard, you oddly don't get to choose your switch at the time of purchase. If you elect to purchase the white keycap option, your keyboard comes with the linear Ghost switches. If, on the other hand, you go with the black, you get the Tactile Phantoms. I wound up having to choose between my preference of the white board and my preference of the tactile switches. I wound up choosing appearance over feel, and as we'll soon talk about, I may be paying the price for it since it's not exactly the typing experience that I would have liked. Thankfully, all Flow keyboards are hot swappable and switches are available to purchase separately. However, this means if you want to mix and match, you must pay Lofree's $70 fee for extra switches, which feels a little high for me. I don't often buy switches, so feel free to let me know in the comments if this pricing is normal, but the fact that it would cost almost $250 to get a clicky version of this keyboard or to get my preferred white board with tactile switches kind of just feels crazy. Adding to this insanity is the fact that the switches are sold exclusively in packs of 90. Remember how I said the fact that the larger Flow had 100 keys? Yeah. I said that was going to be relevant. Well, this means that if you go with the Flow 100 model, which has 100 keys, you won't even get enough switches to fully swap out your entire board. Now you either need to leave some keys in the original switches or buy 2 $70 packs of switches, which suddenly means you're paying nearly as much for switches as you did for the whole board. For a brand looking to lead in a premium category, this lack of ability to get what the user really wants feels like a big miss. Next, we have the keycaps. The shape and feel of these keycaps are awesome. They're slightly concave, which is my preference. They have a large typing area, which is great to type on, and they're made of a die-sub PBT, which means they should hold up well in the long run. However, where they lose me is on the text design of the keycaps. Now, I understand for some users, they may not even notice details like this, but for others, it can drive you a bit crazy, so I'll run through what I noticed real quick for you. First, there's a certain number of keys on the keyboard that have multiple functions, like your comma buttons or brackets or whatever else. On a keycap, you have a choice to either put these next to each other or above. And then from there, you need to space them all appropriately. I honestly don't have strong opinions on where they should go or how they should be spaced. To me, the biggest thing is that they should all be consistent, clean, and clear, and not distracting in any way. Unfortunately, Lofree missed the marks in a few different ways. From a consistency perspective, we have some keys shown on top of each other, some on top with multiple colors, some on top with a line separating them, and then some of which are next to each other. Those keys that have symbols next to each other are also inconsistently spaced. Some clearly have a space in between them, like the colon and semicolon, but then others are right next to each other, like the slash and the question mark. Capitalization is also a bit inconsistent. Page up, page down, and print screen are all two words that are abbreviated on their keys. Just like before, I don't care how these are done, I just think they should all be the same. Instead, two of them have the second word lowercase, one of them has it capitalized. A simple solution would be to just make them in all caps so that you don't have to think about it. On the right side of the board, the command key has the symbol. On the left, it has command written out. Now, this is probably just due to the fact that the key on the right side is too small, but again, consistency would be better in my book. On the function row, if you looked at F8 and F9 in isolation, you'd probably think that they are separated play and pause buttons. However, F9 is actually the forward or skip track button, with F8 being a combined play pause. This is a totally normal setup, but based on the appearance that they chose to use, the number of times that I've skipped a track when intending to hit play has been way more than it should be. In combination, these issues result in the keyboard text being distracting, unclear at times, and overall just unnecessarily inconsistent. But okay. For those of you who are saying, look, I don't care what the keys look like, just how does this thing sound? Here you go. The Lofree Flow with these linear switches sounds very nice. It's quiet and delicate if you're a light typer, and though it can get louder if you've got heavier strokes, it's still a pretty nice sound to my ear. When you're really bottoming out each keystroke, there is a clack sound, which is nice to me, but might not sound great to some. A particular highlight of the flow is the spacebar. It sounds pretty nice, but the thing that stands out in particular is just how consistent that sound is. There's not a lot of variability no matter where you hit it. This easily puts it up there as one of the best spacebars I've ever used. The other standout feature of this board is the typing feel. It's incredibly smooth. Maybe the smoothest typing experience I've ever had. However, that's not to say that I particularly like it. Now, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but typing on this feels like pressing on a marshmallow. I promise I've tried really hard to not let the white color influence me here, but I can't get it out of my mind that this feels like typing on a bunch of marshmallows. The only difference is that you eventually hit the bottom of the marshmallow and it makes a click sound. But either way, it feels smooth and almost a bit squishy to me, which is just not my favorite. One of the biggest reasons why I haven't been a fan of the typing feel is that for one reason or another, I haven't typed well on it. I make a lot of typing errors. It could be as simple as having linear switches when I'm used to tactiles. It could be something else entirely. But the end result is that even though it's smooth and sounds nice, I don't love typing on the Flow personally, and I haven't been able to type on it efficiently. Someday, I'd love to get a chance to try out the tactile switches, but today, this feeling is where I'm at. As we jump over to functionality and features, we unfortunately have some more concerns to think about. First, for those RGB lovers out there, you will only find white backlighting with no keycap shine through on any of the Lofree Flow models. There are some RGB side lights, but they're not very remarkable. You can choose between 8 different colors and either a solid or a pulse. Overall, I primarily chose to use this keyboard with all of the backlighting off. As this keyboard's appearance makes it seem super professional, the lack of RGB isn't that surprising. But the RGB side lights, on the other hand, don't really fit with that professionalism, so it winds up just being a confusing mixture. Finally, if you're in a really dark room, you'll actually notice that the white backlight can show through the top of the keycap slightly, which is just not a good look. The function row is also full of concerns. First, there's no function lock option to toggle between the use of the regular function keys and the alternative functions or multimedia controls. There's also no support for QMK in order to customize this keyboard, so you're unfortunately stuck with the functionality as it's delivered. That functionality varies between Mac and Windows, and in order to switch, you need to use a key command, function M for Mac, and function N for Windows. I've been testing the functionality on Mac personally, and it's a bit odd. From reading the manual, it makes it seem like any of the alternative functions like brightness changes, media controls, or volume would require the use of the function button that sits at the bottom right of the board. In practice, though, that behavior varies. By and large, the function buttons will default to the multimedia controls or those alternative functions. Tapping F8, for example, will play pause without the need for hitting that function button. Same goes for volume, launchpad, mission control, and others. The big exception is backlight brightness, which for whatever reason requires the use of that function button. Plus, on top of that, there's options for calculator, voice assistant, and lock, which only work on Windows and just do nothing on Mac. It's strange and it's inconsistent behavior, and it makes it a less than stellar user experience, especially when there's no function lock or other way to customize how this thing works. Connectivity continues the struggles. The Flow features 3-device Bluetooth support, which is good, as well as direct wired capabilities, also good. However, it lacks any support for 2.4 gig wireless USB connections. And finally, the Bluetooth suffers from one of my biggest pet peeves. It goes to sleep quick and it wakes up slow. I've had this issue previously on some older Keychron models, and the Lofree appears to go to sleep after about 10 minutes of activity and takes at least a few seconds of tapping to wake it back up. It's painful to use, and there doesn't appear to be any way to turn off the sleep function or adjust the timing. My recommendation, use the wired mode. Finally, we have the battery, which is only 2,000 milliamp hours, or about half the size of a comparable Newfie model, though it is bigger than what Keychron puts in their keyboards. That battery will get you an advertised 40 hours of usage, which means you're probably going to be charging this thing regularly. I definitely got more than 40 hours of use when I was using it with backlighting off, but regardless of how you plan to use the keyboard, a battery this size on a keyboard this price is another miss. Additionally, on the power front, the on-off switch and charging port are both tucked really far down on the back of the device. It's hard to reach back there to turn the keyboard on and off, especially if you've got larger fingers. You may actually have to pick the keyboard up in order to toggle that switch successfully. That switch is also directly next to the USB-C port that's used for charging and for the wired connection. The included USB cable that comes in the box is a USB-A to USB-C, with the USB-C that plugs into the keyboard actually being an angled USB-C connector. If you point this towards the outside, away from the on-off switch, then the cable naturally extends beyond the end of the keyboard, which doesn't really look that great. If you instead point it towards the middle, which feels more natural, you wind up blocking the on-off switch. It feels like a straight cable would have just been more appropriate given the setup of how this is all configured. All right, now let's talk value and pricing. The Lofree Flow is a premium, all aluminum keyboard, and it's priced accordingly. $160 for this 84 key and $170 for the 100 key. Now, unlike many of their competitors, they actually do offer free shipping if you order directly from their website. If you buy through Amazon, on the other hand, you will likely pay a $10 premium on either model, which is typically used to cover that shipping charge. So if you're looking to save money, ordering direct is likely the way to go. However, based on my experience, just don't necessarily expect the board to arrive quickly. Although it says that items are ready to ship in 2 to 5 days on their website, my confirmation email showed a delivery expectation of 10 to 25 days. I then didn't actually receive a tracking number, and eventually it just showed up on my door somewhere between 15 and 20 business days after ordering. So the $10 premium on Amazon is basically like paying for express delivery, since at least in my region, it shows shipping directly from Amazon with delivery expectations in less than a week. The good news is that I did eventually get a tracking number emailed to me. The issue is that it arrived in my inbox 25 days after the keyboard arrived to my door. I'm hoping that my experience was just a fluke, but with that big of a miss, there's some sort of internal processes that need to be evaluated. Delays aside, is the Flow worth the $160 price? Probably not. It feels like Lofree has a core here, which is special. However, they also appear to have cut a lot of corners in the process, and as a result, the premium price just isn't really justified. In the end, the only differentiators I can point to are the full aluminum case, the very smooth typing, excellent sound, and that very solid spacebar. On the list of potential deal breakers, we see a concerning number of items. There are the biggest issues for me personally, which includes that slow waking from sleep, the lack of adjustable feet, and the inability to pick the color and the key switch offering, which absolutely should be available for the $160 price point. There's also that smaller issue with extra switches coming in a pack of 90 rather than a pack of 100 for the larger board, which is really just silly. Even if you've got to work it out with Kale and do some discussions with your supplier there, it just needs to happen. That doesn't make any sense. We've also got some very common complaints from the keyboard community more broadly, including the lack of 2.4 gig wireless connection option and no support for QMK or any other form of customization. Honestly, even if something proprietary was offered, that would be better than nothing at all. This lack of customization makes that strange function row and the lack of a function lock even worse, since there's no way to adjust from the default. Finally, we have the smaller issues, like the font inconsistencies in the keycaps, the white-only backlighting, and the underwhelming RGB sidelights, plus a weirdly hard-to-reach power switch, a silly angled charging cable, and some surprisingly sharp metal sides. The sheer number of potential deal breakers means that there is likely to be something on that list that's going to impact your day-to-day. The question then, is that impact big enough to take away from the smooth typing and excellent sound? Only you can be the judge of that, but for me, it's a no. Especially since I ran into issues typing consistently on the Flow, this keyboard is sadly not for me. Personally, I'll save the money and get a Newfie Air or a Keychron K Max instead. Or perhaps the Lofree Flow Lite will fill in those gaps, but we're just gonna have to wait to the full review to find out. Thank you guys so much for watching. The Lofree Flow was a keyboard that folks have asked me to cover for some time. I can't always get to all the suggestions that people leave, but the more that I see one of them pop up, the more likely it is that it's gonna get covered. So what keyboard do you really wanna see covered on the channel next? Let me know down in those comments. I appreciate you all, and I will see you in the next one. Why did I choose to wear a white shirt covering a white keyboard?